Welcome to the Wake Up Mission Show with your hosts, Shalene Nightingale and Randy Dees.
Where is the revolution? Where is our solution? The time to wake up is here and now. Time for revolution.
Hey, thank you for tuning in to Truth Tuesday here at the Wake Up Mission Show, an underground network connecting the dots for liberty. In our second hour today, we have John Hancock. You know, he came back from the grave to talk about the Constitution. No, just joking. John Hancock is a modern-day version, though, of a founding father, I would say, and we're going to be discussing topics of the Constitution, freedom, and liberty, and he is the author of Liberty Inherited. So, obviously, he didn't just inherit the name, he inherited the beliefs. Here in the first hour, Randy and I are going to do something a little bit different. I mean, it is Truth Tuesday, so we're talking conspiracy. But today we're going to get a little technical, a little bit more into technology, and I hope you'll stay tuned for this entire time. Today the topic is GWEN. What is GWEN? No, if you listen to us on Music Revolution, I knew you were going to say that. In fact, I have it right here. No, Randy, not as in Gwen Stefani, who I'm sure you think is hot. Because she is. But no, it's not Gwen Stefani. It's the GWEN Towers. The acronym stands for Ground Wave Emergency Network. And in light of current events out there, like the Pacific Northwest earthquake, like HAARP, the fact that we've been talking chemtrails and other geo-engineering on our show, the fact that we're talking about Iran now and a possible other war, I felt like today was a good time to talk about GWEN. Again, it stands for Ground Wave Emergency Network. So I know it sounds like it's something useful. I mean, they use the word emergency, and you know, Randy, they do this all the time. Like the Patriot Act. You know, anytime that the government wants something implemented, they use words that will fool you into thinking it's something good for you. So,
schools, children, the police, fire, and rescue.
Right. Well, the list goes on. So, is GWEN good for you, or is it something more nefarious? So let's explore. The original stated reason, Randy, for the implementation was for the United States government to facilitate military communications before, during, and after a nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, of course, you know, we before I go any further, we've heard this before as well. Oh, the military needs it. You know, we need to be in this war over here. We need to help this country over here. You know, we need this. We hear this all the time. It's good for you. And they use the military quite often for the excuse because they know most people were patriotic. We love our country. We love our veterans. We love our active soldiers. Anyways, specifically, GWEN was constructed to allegedly survive the effects of a high-altitude nuclear explosion generating electromagnetic pulse known as hemp. No, not the hemp that you smoke, apparently, but that's what they call it, to ensure that the United States president could issue a launch order to strategic nuclear bombers. Now, my question when I was doing this research for today's show, if we're all dead because of a nuclear war, how would the president still be here? Just a question, just food for thought. And if he's the only survivor, along with maybe some other elite, then what would they, what further would there need to be done? Just some questions, some food for thought. Anyway, this technology, there we go, was originally tested by the Air Force from 1978 to 1982. And what's interesting about that, look, my father was in the Air Force. I was raised in the Air Force. I loved living on the military base of the Air Force, I have to tell you. Very patriotic. So this is nothing against the soldiers or the military, for which my father was part of the Air Force. But just interesting to note, Randy, we've done geoengineering shows. We've discussed the topic here on our show. Yeah. And the Air Force, it is claimed, is the branch of the military that created chemtrails. We've heard that before.
Yeah, from drones.
Right. Yes, and the drones. Exactly. Now, although it was declared by the Air Force that GWEN wouldn't be launched until 1992, reports indicate as early as the late 1980s. And when I was reading and doing research, I couldn't really tell. Some reports said GWEN was launched in 1988 with some towers. Some say that the completion was not until 1992. The good news was different than today, though. And see, this is more food for thought. Back then, around 1990, there was major public outrage. People were protesting on military bases. There was city and town hall meetings all across the country. The outrage was unanimous. Unlike today where we see nothing. So, Randy, when I was doing the research, I thought, you know what, this is really interesting because you and I ask a lot, why don't we see more activity from Americans? And yet, everything that we do on this show, it's really interesting to note that decades ago, people were taking action. And I hear from a lot of older Americans that, in our day, we did take action. So, it's interesting, but again, when there was public outrage about GWEN, it was before the implementation. So post the implementation, doesn't seem like Americans get so outraged as much. It's just an observation. Was there a correlation? That I don't know. But what I do know is in 1994, new construction of GWEN towers were banned, so they said, after a defense appropriation bill eliminated any funding for the towers for 1 year. But just for 1 year, okay? Keep that in mind. A few months later, the United States Air Force announced that they would terminate the construction contract to build the remaining 25 towers. Now, this is something. Since the fiscal year 1998 to 1999, the GWEN system has been replaced by Milstar SCAMP terminals, and GWEN operations and maintenance funding has been terminated. But is this true? Is GWEN no longer operational, or did they just change the name to something else? Because it notes right here, they've admitted they replaced it with Milstar SCAMP terminals. What we do know is that the GWEN towers still exist in this country today. They're still up. Some were taken down, but I couldn't find any confirmation. By the way, that was interesting. When I went to go look at the destinations or the locations of GWEN, the list from the 1990s and the list today seem pretty similar. So, were any towers indeed taken down? what we do know is that our government spent over $11 million, over $11 million for the design and implementation. Now, keep in mind, though, and this was something that struck me, consider all the dates I've been saying. 1980, 1989, 1990, 1994, 1998. Okay, these dates are really key because this was established allegedly after the Cold War ended. So if the Cold War ended, why post-Cold War were they implementing GWEN towers? Now, there are still some people online discussing GWEN today, especially due to all the mystery surrounding the program and the fact that there's towers still up, and many question if GWEN is being used in conjunction with HAARP for weather manipulation, and even some wonder if it is used for mass mind and behavior control. So before you laugh at these thoughts, before you think, oh, this is ridiculous and I'm going to tune out, but wait a minute. This is what Truth Tuesday is all about. We're here to present an idea or a reality that is out there that the mainstream mocks. And what we do on Truth Tuesday is we explore it a little bit deeper. Is it something we should take seriously? So here's what we do know about a GWEN. A GWEN station transmits up to a 300-mile radius. Up to a 300-mile radius, and after that, the signal does drop off sharply, after that distance. So the entire GWEN system consists of from 58 to an intended 300 transmitters spread across the USA, each with a tower. They're towered 299 to 500 feet high. Now, the reason why I put in here between 58 to 300 transmitters, all the data had something different. So I couldn't confirm, is it just 58 or is it 300? Maybe it was 300 back in the 1980s and 90s, but maybe they've removed many, and so now there's just 58. That I couldn't really tell, Randy, so that's why such a large factor number there. The towers, in addition, include 350 feet of copper wires, and what they do is they fan out from underneath the structure, through the ground like an umbrella spokes. And it interacts with the earth so that signals can travel down into basements, for example. GWEN transmissions are between 150 and 175 kHz, but the towers also emit UHF waves of 225 to 400 MHz. Now, when I was doing this, I found there was a statement made by then Secretary of Defense Lee Aspen. And what was interesting about Lee, Randy, we talk about this organization, this nefarious organization on our show all the time, the Council on Foreign Relations, for which he was an active member, okay? And I put that in here exactly, Randy, for a reason. Now, here was a statement that CFR member, Secretary of Defense, so ironic, right, stated. These are his words. He stated the idea of nuclear war receded to the vanishing point. This is what he said. So my question when I was doing the research for today, why in just a few short weeks after he made that statement, why did Aspen then turn around and push ahead with finishing the GWEN Tower project? Why? If nuclear war had receded to the vanishing point, he's supposedly the Secretary of Defense, why after that did he push for the completion of the project? Inquiring minds would like to know. What'd you say?
Oh, to get his uncle paid?
Yeah, there you go, or something more. What I also found out today, the United States Coast Guard began outfitting a number of GWEN sites allegedly to house the National Differential GPS System. Existing equipment, they claim, fit the needs of the ND GPS. So isn't that interesting? So again, my question, did they rename the program or simply deceive the outraged public into believing the program had ended? And something you and I note on this show all the time, they pad bills with funding. So maybe, yes, indeed, they no longer fund GWEN through the normal doors, but what are they padding and with what other name?
Yeah, and you've seen the movie Independence Day, right? With Will Smith
Yes,
and all
with
those.
Will Smith. Uh-huh.
Right, you know, when they first get to Area 51 and the president, you know, he had no idea that it was there. He said, the president says, how do you get funding for this place? And Judd Hirsch says, what, do you think they really paid $20,000 for a toilet seat and $30,000 for a hammer?
Exactly. Well, in late 18, now we're going to get a little scientific. So stay with me here. Because even when I was doing this research, I had to read quite a bit, and I had to go read other sites. Today would have been a perfect day to have our guest yesterday, Bob Podolsky, on the show to do this segment with me. So pay attention. In late 1864, there was a guy named James Clerk Maxwell, and he published material on electromagnetic waves. Now, his material dealt not only with the electrical and magnetic waves, but also the relativistic and ethereal-psychoactive component of these waves. His equations also included transformations that enabled the change from inertial frames of reference to non-inertial frames of reference. And his original equations were written in quantum notation, which is a complex mathematical system. And available, I guess now, this was before vector analysis was introduced by a guy named Oliver Heaviside. So today's generalized equivalent of quantions is tensors. I know it's very scientific, and when I was doing this research, I felt that I may not fully understand it, but I felt it was important. Okay? So basically, in a nutshell, Maxwell's work gave the necessary information for gravitational propulsion and psychoactive devices. Psychoactive devices. Now, what is very interesting about this, while he was alive, nobody challenged his work, okay? Nothing at all. But people were obviously paying attention because very shortly after his death, this Oliver Heaviside, another guy, a chemist, Willard Gibbs, and a physicist, Henrik Hertz, decided to edit and reinterpret Maxwell's work. Why would they need to do that? So this unholy trinity, I thought that was funny. Somebody wrote online, I thought that was funny. They disregarded the components, the psychoactive components of Maxwell's original equations because they said it only represented potentials and not fields. So were these scientists, Randy, because why didn't they question him, these scientists who knew him, while he was alive? So my question when I was going over the history here was, were these scientists paid to deflect the truth, just like we have scientists out there that are pro-global warming. So, were these scientists sponsored? Well, the ionosphere and electromagnetic wave conductor, 100 kms above the Earth, consists of a layer of electrically charged particles. It's very interesting to know this, acting as a shield from solar winds. It was something else that struck me, because what are we seeing today? Government is implementing solar farms throughout places in this country. I know California, we have solar farms popping up everywhere, funded by the government, or really you, the taxpayer. Natural waves are related to the electrical activity in the atmosphere and are thought to be caused by multiple lightning storms. Remember, Randy, it was about a week ago I was telling you about all these lightning storms that were here. So, just kind of caught my eye. Well, apparently, I guess you put these two waves together. They're called the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance. These are quasi-standing, apparently extremely low frequency, known as ELF waves, that apparently naturally exist in the Earth's electromagnetic cavity, which, of course, is the space between the ground and the ionosphere. Well, these Earth brain waves are identical. Really hear this, because this really popped out at me. These Earth brain waves are identical to our own brain waves. ELF waves from HARP, when targeted on certain areas, can engineer weather and create mood changes affecting millions of people. And we had a guest here on recently that made reference to this fact. And when I was doing the scientific research, it came up, confirming what our guest said. Well, these GWEN transmitters have many different functions, including controlling the weather, the mind, behavior, and mood control of the populace. Again, this was in scientific research that this was found. This is not somebody's opinion. This is based on the work of scientists. So they can also be used to send synthetic telepathy disguised as infrasound to victims of U.S. government mind control implants. I know that sounds crazy. Again, this is what I found online, and get this, and this is very hyperlinked. I have some links from the sources that I found, and we will put them on our website, thewakeupmissionshow.com. You can also, of course, find it on our Facebook page, The Wake Up Mission, which is connected to our site. So these towers, these GWEN towers, do work in conjunction with HARP. And the Russian woodpecker transmitter, a system similar to HARP. Now, isn't this interesting, Randy? Especially if these GWEN towers that were allegedly put up because of nuclear war after the Cold War. Now Russia is involved. I mean, what?
Yeah, I may be jumping ahead a little, but, when I was reading this today, earlier, these sound waves, nothing stops them. And maybe,
nothing.
Like how, it's been alleged, or it's come out that the U.S. government doesn't actually torture so-called terror detainees. They send them over to other countries. Well, maybe they subcontracted this GWEN project out to the Russians, and they are actually sending the waves back through the Earth from Russia to the U.S. When you mentioned that I started, the wheels started turning. I was thinking, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was true.
Right. Another thing that popped into my head when I was doing this research is a couple of years back. I mean, this was, long before we did our show. I was reading a really interesting expose on Silicon Valley.
Uh-huh.
And in Silicon Valley, and this was in a by the way, I can't remember the publication. Again, I read it a couple of years ago. I think I read it. In fact, it might have been longer. I might have read it during the campaign because I think somebody sent it to me. But anyway, what was interesting about it is that this expose stated that there are Russian spies living in Silicon Valley, and they had names of people, and it was really documented. I tried to find it today because I was going to incorporate it, but I couldn't remember, what source I read it in, unfortunately. I did find some similar sources, but I liked the one that I had read because it was well documented. But that was all something interesting to note as well. And then, of course, there's always, and we get these, we don't really report it on the show because I haven't really seen evidence because, we're an alternative show, to mainstream media radio talk shows. But I still don't want to just source everything we find because because alternative media can also get a little out there. And we have had people send us, there's Russian military on our soil. It's not that I doubt it. That's not true at all. In fact, I highly suspect that to be the case, but I haven't found any actual sources of information that I can say, it's 100% fact. But I just was thinking of all these things when I was doing this part of the research today. I thought, wow, this is just really interesting. Now, for any American who thinks HAARP is ridiculous, I know somebody who actually worked on a HAARP machine, and there is a government website for HAARP in our country. Okay, so this is a fact. You can Google and look it up. But the Russians, you can look it up. Their version of their weather engineering, geo-engineering system is called ELATE, ELATE. And they can fine-tune weather patterns apparently over a 200-mile radius. It has the same range, basically, as GWEN. Has the same as GWEN. And apparently, at the Moscow airport, they have a system in place, allegedly, over at their airport. Well, the internet website for which you can find some information, because the GWEN towers, apparently, they shoot bursts of energy into the atmosphere in conjunction with HAARP. And there's an internet website you can go to for some more information, cuttingedge.org, cuttingedge.org, and they published an expose on how this system can cause major floods, and that it did cause a major flood in 1993 in the Midwest. And that's what this cuttingedge.org states. So the GWEN towers, and this is something, pay attention to this. Here we on our show, or actually I'm not sure we did it on the show. I know I posted it on my Facebook. We didn't do it on the show, I don't think, or we might have, because it was mainstream media. But the mainstream media is all out saying, if you live in the Pacific Northwest, you should move. We've been hearing this because allegedly they're going to have, we did talk about this on the show, there's going to be a major earthquake, and anybody living west of the I-5 in Oregon and Washington, you're going to go under the water, according. Now, what we found interesting is that Shepard Smith on Fox News, it was like he was not reporting a prediction or a suspicion, but that he was reporting a fact. I watched the clip, and it gave me chills. I was like, okay, this guy's on the inside, and he knows something. And you and I talked, maybe it will happen, maybe it will not happen, but after I did my research of this GWEN towers today, and I didn't even do it knowing this, I did it because I had some suspicions, but there are GWEN towers positioned on the fault lines in volcanic areas of the Pacific Northwest. I just found this out doing the research for this. So will this quake? So is it? Will this quake? Will it be because of these GWEN towers, Randy?
Makes you wonder.
It does make you wonder. Well, in 1901, Nikola Tesla, he won the Nobel Prize in physics, revealed that power could be transmitted through the ground using ELF waves. And like you said, nothing stops it. Now, the Russians retrieved Tesla's paper after he died. In Mexico, the Perot, a man down there, continued to monitor the Russian ELF wave signal and the higher harmonics in the MHZ range. Apparently, this Perot, he was somehow induced to work for the CIA. Wasn't that interesting? So here he's monitoring all of this, and the next thing you know, he's working for the CIA. And once he started working for the CIA, he and this Dr. Robert Becker designed equipment to measure these waves and their effect on the human brain. Now, why, again, this is in the early 1900s, why would they do that? Why would our government have a doctor and a CIA agent design equipment to measure waves on the effects of the human brain? Why would they need to do this? Now, this Perich started his work, I guess, in around 1948. In the mid 1940s, and when he started it, he used dogs. All right, and he put dogs to sleep. Then he graduated to monkeys, and this is just, I'm sorry, I'm just stating the facts here. This is what he did to the monkeys. He deliberately destroyed their eardrums. Deliberately. How evil is this? This is just evil.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. To enable them to pick up sounds without their eardrums intact. I mean, that's just wicked. And what he discovered was that a nerve from the tongue could be used to facilitate hearing. So a nerve from the tongue could be used to facilitate hearing. Now, he created this tooth implant. Again, this is in the 1940s. So this is not today. This didn't happen yesterday. This happened in the 1940s. So imagine the technology they have today. So he created this tooth implant that would work to mind control victims. And I guess this tooth caused them to hear voices in their head. Also, since we're talking about teeth, what about fluoride? It's not really a subject we've talked a lot about on this show. We mentioned it, I think, briefly a couple of times. But again, based on this research, based on what they say about fluoride, it all goes hand in hand. So anyway, apparently now today, because all these years later, implants are now smaller than like a strand of hair. They're so small now, and according to what I read, they're injecting this into vaccines and flu shots. You and I've talked about vaccines so many times on this show.
Yeah.
We've told you about the ingredients. We've told you what is happening. And apparently they're biochips. And what they do is they circulate in your bloodstream and they lodge in your brain. So, isn't it interesting, Randy? Of everything we say about vaccines, suddenly, here recently, all the propaganda that the mainstream media puts out about vaccines, how they belittle people like you and I, All we're doing is we're presenting scientific fact, the CDC information. We've talked about the missing and dead doctors as of late. It's now up to 7.
Yeah, and this is not even, this is like more evidence than just, all the disgusting ingredients that are in those vaccines. This is something completely different that's even more sinister than the poison and the cow dung and monkey brains.
Right, exactly. And keep in mind, for everybody who's listening to the show, you know that they passed a forced vaccine bill on children in the state of California. And now they're talking about a forced vaccine on adults and making it a crime if you don't get a vaccine. Now, this is all to save your lives.
It's for your own good, for your own protection. We're not heard that.
Right, exactly. So, anyway, we're going to fast forward from 1940s to March 21st, 1983. The Sydney Morning Herald, so of course, obviously in Australia, published this. All right, Dr. Nassim Abid El Aziz. Try that out for a name. And he's from Egypt. And this is what he said. Russian satellites controlled by advanced computers can send voices in one's own language interwoven into natural thoughts. Again, this is cited from the Sydney Morning Herald by a doctor back on March 21st, 1983. He went on to say they can target the population of choice with this diffused artificial thought process. The chemistry and electricity of the human brain can be manipulated by satellite, and even suicide can be induced. He went on to say, through ferocious anti-humanitarian means, the groups are fabricated. The troubles and bloody disturbances are instigated by advanced telemeans via Russian satellites in many countries in Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America. So now the Russians apparently broke the genetic code of the human brain. They worked out 23 EEG band wavelengths, 11 of which were totally independent. So if you can manipulate those 11, you can do absolutely anything. Well, the U.S. National Security Agency, where's that? They always use those words, security.
Yeah.
Anyway, they had computers, Cray computers, which could remotely track people just by knowing the specific EMF waves of a person's bioelectrical field.
Yeah, Cray
yeah, this is information that came out. This is when the actual mainstream media reported all of this. Yes,
yeah, well,
Randy.
I was just going to say Cray computers, they're like the top fuel dragsters in the computer world. These things are like the monster computers. And yeah,
wow.
Back in the 1980s, it's no coincidence, like the reports like from Bohemian Grove in the 80s, this article from the Sydney newspaper in the 80s. You don't hear none of this stuff anymore.
No, even Barney Miller. We used to play a clip from his show, from that show, which they were talking about the Bilderbergs and Rockefeller. That was from even the early 80s. So, yeah, it seems like in the 80s the truth was out there. But like, remember, George Bush Sr. said in the early 1990s, welcome to the New World Order. And since that time, we've seen one false flag event after another. The mainstream media is completely controlled. There's been many. In fact, we just cited Amber Lyon yesterday, who was a 3-time Emmy-winning journalist on CNN. She's the latest in a line of many very well-known reporters coming out and saying it isn't the news, it's propaganda. Cheryl Atkinson, another one from CBS. Anyway, apparently each person's emissions are unique, and they can remotely track someone in public that they target and specify the person. They can then send them low-frequency subliminal messages that they actually think are their own thoughts. I know when the cell towers came out, there was a lot of talk about what those were really for, and we've even, what we do know is that the police can shut off your cell phone from a distance and to completely shut it off. We know that they can track our cell phones. So all this information that is coming out is not ridiculous, and it should give everybody food for thought. Well, there's a researcher by the name of Majix, M-A-J-I-X, and this person says our brains are so sensitive that they are like liquid crystal in response to magnetic component of the earth. He went on to say we are sensitive to Earth's magnetic changes. What's interesting, I think here recently, Linda, she co-hosts here sometimes, show coordinator, was talking about how she knew a storm was coming, and said, talked about she got a headache or didn't feel right. Well, here you go. There's nothing to do with your age there, Linda. After all, it's sensitive to the Earth's magnetic changes. And you often hear people say, oh, I know when the weather's going to get bad. I can feel it. Here you go. Yeah. Well, changes, he went on, Magix went on to say changes in the ionosphere cavity can resonate those frequencies, and we are incredibly complex entities beyond the layperson's comprehension. He said our brains are indeed a type of biocosmic transducer. Now, physicists in Russia apparently have conducted in-depth studies on the effects of the mean annual magnetic activity, electromagnetic, and electrostatic fields on human behavior and the physical body. Well, these electromagnetic and electrostatic fields can be likened to what is popularly known as biorhythms. These magnetic frequencies can be manipulated from a very simple piece of equipment operated at extremely low power levels. Our brain waves can mimic magnetic frequencies. So from a half a second to 4 seconds later, the neurons and brain waves are driven exclusively by this device, power levels almost non-existent. So all one needs is an antenna aimed up at the ionosphere cavity, and they can manipulate the moods of everyone within a 75 square foot mile area. The body picks up these new manipulated waves and begins to correspond immediately. What is known as the sleep frequency will make everyone become tired and sleep. What's interesting, Randy, I started, because we've reported this on the show with Agenda 21, and there's many evidence of this. We've said this on the show, how they want to move everybody from rural area. We had Kirk McKenzie on here from Defend Rural America into the city. Even the former mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, admitted, notice how you don't see him in politics anymore, because he admitted too many things of what they were doing. That's what I believe. But that he said, we want everybody to live in high rises in the city. So could this be another reason why? Because if you're in the city, the towers are there. They can manipulate you. But if you're living out in the rural area where there's no towers, they can't really do that. Now, can they? So we do ask you and I, we've talked about this a lot on the show. Why is it that people do not seem outraged and take action? So could it be due to GWEN towers sending out signals? Maybe today's information might be too much for some of our listeners, but again, we will have links for you to read and review. And remember, we cited this on our very, very first Truth Tuesday show. Randy had found an excellent piece, I think was it from Business Insider, or it was from a business source, about all the conspiracies in the past that were proven to be true. And we covered those.
Yeah, there was like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and we covered this. So remember, past conspiracies became facts.
Yeah, and it wasn't like they stopped, you know.
Right. They didn't just suddenly say, "Oh, we're not going to, be manipulative like this." And remember, a lot of what I covered today about this subject, it happened in the 1800s. The early 1900s, the 1940s. And it's just really interesting that, if you even think back, I mean, look, we're not radical hippies, and I don't know, maybe I would have ended up being one back then, I don't know, but certainly when you look at the information of that era, in the millions of people that would go march or go to Washington, D.C., and all that they did, this was before these towers. And we've often questioned why. Why, when there's so much more tyranny today? Now, look, we know many hippies became, commie radicals, and we so don't agree with that on this show. But isn't it amazing that now we're under so much more tyranny today, and there's a lot less action? You see everybody on Facebook, but why aren't they getting up? Randy?
Yeah, they're afraid. Everybody can be a tough guy on the internet. I had this conversation with Michael School today. We were chatting, and he'll be on with us on Thursday for Tree of Liberty Thursday. People, they can be tough guys on the internet, but when it comes to actually getting out there, getting into the streets, going face to face, toe to toe, they want the other guy to do it. They don't want to make the sacrifice. Oh, I got to wash my hair, got to take the kids to soccer practice, or just plain, I'm afraid, or I don't want to get out there and bring any trouble to myself. No one wants to make the sacrifices necessary. They want the other guy to do it.
But based on what we covered today with GWEN, when you think about everything that is being done to us, the chemtrails, the fluoride, the Monsanto GMO foods, the vaccines, now GWEN, with everything that is being done, I now understand it quite a bit more, because people don't have the health or the mind now. We're weaker today because of all these outside, I think, engineering programs designed to make sure that we are, we cannot go to battle, basically. So there cannot be an uprising. Yes, Randy.
Well, I was going to say not only the physical health, like the mental health aspect of it. South Park did an excellent episode about ADHD some years ago. It was hilarious, but it was really true in a lot of ways. But with the mind control, the electromagnetic waves, and all this stuff combined not only does it have a really bad physical toll on people, it has a bad mental toll on people to where if, the masses are being controlled through radio waves, they think everything's honky-dory, or they're just not mentally capable of, critical thought and questioning the things that are going on, and having the mental acumen to say this is not right. I've got to get out and do something. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. It's like zombies. The zombie apocalypse really happened, but people aren't going around eating brains. It's just the vast majority of the people are like, they're on Ritalin. They're on a type of Ritalin to where they're not mentally able to resist. I guess that's my long-winded explanation.
Yeah, but it's something. I was reading an article in a homeschooling publication, and it was really interesting. And this was before I did, obviously did research for this show. But there had been some scientific research that for those who got out of their homes, got out of the cities, went into the mountains, literally this is what this article said. So when they went out into nature, away from it all, that the people felt better, had more energy, and felt more connected and alert. I think that there's a lot more than just being out in God's nature to it. I think that it's because when they're out of the city and into that environment, they're free of all the chemicals, the brain waves, and everything else that they're doing. So just some food for thought. We hope you enjoyed today's Truth Tuesday and the subject of GWEN. Next Tuesday, we're going to do something a little bit different. Next week, Randy, is actually the first anniversary of our show. So we've got a lot that's going to happen next week. And so next Tuesday, we're going to do 9/11. And we're going to be joined by my friend Art Olivier. The reason, Art Olivier was one of our very first guests in the first week of our show, and Art is the producer and writer of the 9/11 truth film Operation Terror. So for next Tuesday, that will be the subject we cover as part of our celebration of the first anniversary of our show. So, Randy, that's all I have for this hour. What do you have for any headlines?
Well, if I don't choke to death on that water, yeah. Bear with me a second.
Hopefully it was fluoride-free water.
Oh, it was bottled water. I don't see any fluoride in it, but God only knows what's really in it.
Right, exactly.
It went down the wrong pipe anyway. Well, let's see. Okie dokie. Well, yeah, this is, I saw this today. And, this is one of those things that makes you go, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. And, this actual fact is out there, but I didn't really correlate it until today when I saw this headline. And it is that illegal aliens they outnumber unemployed Americans, and by how much? And it always goes back to exactly how many, God only knows how many illegal aliens are really here. Is it 11 million? Is it 30? Is it, a kajillion? Is it, 25 people? Well, anyways, the one that they always say 11.3 million. And we know it's a lot higher, but anyways, let's just use that number for argument's sake to have a number to compare. Okay, there's 11.3 million illegal aliens here. 8.1 million are participating in the labor force. They make up about 5% of the labor force, 5.1%, according to Pew, right? Well, in 2014, there were 1.7 million more illegal aliens living in the U.S. than there were unemployed American citizens. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average number of unemployed Americans in 2014 was 9.6 million. So compare that to 11.3, and that gives you 1.7 million. And, you know, we've talked about this, you know, how many times? Hundreds. There's more people than jobs. And we've even cited...
Well, not only that, I want to question those numbers because back in 2005, well, actually in late 2004, I was awakened by my friend Christopher. So, Christopher, thank you again. And in early 2005, I joined an organization, and in the spring of 2005, I started becoming an activist. And the first issue was illegal immigration. And
right.
The exact number that they put out back then, again, this is 2005, is the exact same number that they're stating a decade later about
right.
illegal alien numbers? No, BS. And that's the closest to swearing you're going to get me. BS.
Oh, come
the
on.
numbers have more than multiplied, and I guarantee that that's the number of illegal aliens we have in the state of California alone.
Oh, that's how many are in Los Angeles County alone.
Yeah, exactly. You've marched with me downtown, so you know. But also the number of those unemployed, I say, is much higher as well. You have people that drop off the system, no longer receiving benefits. And also, you can't really call people that when they go to underemployment as really being employed in the manner in which they were in the past. So both numbers higher, but nonetheless, of course, there's more illegal aliens in this country than there are Americans employed, in unemployment. But did you see my friend Eric Parker? Hello, Eric. I know you listen to the show. That he posted on my timeline. I'm not sure if you saw it. There was a model. She was doing some modeling on the ocean in Florida, and there's a video. So during her, photo shoot, I guess the photographer or somebody was there, videotaped. All of a sudden, a boat comes not all the way to the shore, but comes in quite a ways. All of a sudden you see, oh my gosh, just numerous people pile out of this boat, all just crossing into our country. I don't know where they were coming from, Mexico or Cuba. I'm suspecting Cuba since it was Florida, but who knows? It still could have been Mexico, Central South America. I mean, who knows? But they were all very much Latin and, looking, and just piled out, and they run, swim, run up to the shore. They're running everywhere. It was caught on video.
Yeah, I saw the headline, but I didn't have time to read the story. Yesterday, it was a 30-hour day, so I didn't have time. And normally, if it's a story that says anything about model, bikini, something like that, I'm all over it, and I didn't have time for that one yesterday. But that was hilarious, in a way.
Just amazing. I have another one that just came to me from HSLDA that I want to report because based on our Truth Tuesday discussion today, apparently the governor of Connecticut followed in the steps of Jerry Brown. He signed into a law a bill, House Bill 6949, which creates administrative burdens for parents claiming a religious exemption from state-required childhood immunizations. As in the past, immunizations are required for public and non-public school students and children in daycare centers, family daycare, etc., but prior law only required that parents or guardians file a statement of religious objection. That's all they had to do. Well, this new law, Randy, requires that the statement be acknowledged, so notarized by a judge, clerk of court, town clerk, notary public, justice of the peace, or a Connecticut state attorney. Further, parents or guardians must file the statement every year instead of just once as the child was entering school, as was originally required by law. So now they have to do this every single year. They have to get it notarized. And just based on what we talked about today, why would they make this change?
Well, it's not really a law. When you think of what Michael's school tells us, all these so-called laws, they're all codes. The court system, it's a de facto. It's not a de jure court system. So those laws, they're meaningless. It's just ink on paper that doesn't mean squat, That's my
right.
thoughts on that.
Right. Well, it's the top of the hour, so we're going to go to break. And when we're back, we've got John Hancock rising from the grave. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned for the second half of the Wake Up Mission Show.
The Wake Up Mission Show is actually Sunday through Friday. On Sunday, join Sean Weed and Linda Gilstrap when they pray what they want and tell you all about the Word of God. Monday through Thursday, of course, it's where Randy and I say what we want. On Fridays, we take a break. We take a break and we play what we want. Join us for Music Revolution Friday. And soon, there is going to be a Saturday Solutions, because as you just heard, there are more illegal aliens than Americans employed. So guess what? We're going to have some solutions.